Part 1. The observation deck of the orbital station Aurora's End hung in silence, high above the curve of Earth. Below, the planet turned slowly, wrapped in night and scattered with the last lights of human cities. Lena Voss stood by the wide window, her hands resting lightly on the cool metal railing. She did not move. She barely breathed. Her eyes followed the slow fade of Tokyo's glow, then Shanghai's, then the long ribbon of light along the eastern coast of North America. One by one, the cities went dark. It was not a power failure. It was a choice. Down on the surface, the final shuttles had lifted off hours ago. Every person who could be saved was already aboard the fleet waiting in high orbit. The great arc ship Odyssey, flanked by dozens of support vessels, hung like a silent promise against the black. Inside it, nearly 2 billion souls waited, not in fear but in quiet resolve. They were leaving everything behind, not because they had to, but because they finally understood they could not stay. Lena turned away from the window. Her uniform, once crisp and proud with the Terran delegation insignia, now felt heavy. She had argued for months, even years, that the Galactic Concord was wrong about Earth, wrong about humanity. But no one listened. Not really. To the Council, humans were emotional, impulsive, too young to grasp the deeper truths of the galaxy. They called them fireflies, bright, brief and easily extinguished. Now, as Earth dimmed behind her, Lena wondered if the fireflies had simply flown somewhere the Council could not see. Far across the void, on the polished marble floors of the Grand Chamber on Xylos Prime, panic stirred. The news had spread like a shockwave. Humanity's final broadcast had been received by every major species in the Concord. It was not a cry for help. It was not a declaration of war. It was calm, clear, final, we are leaving. Do not follow. The words played on every screen in every language over and over. Ambassador Kale of the Vireth Collective slammed his 3-fingered fist on the council table. This is unacceptable, he hissed, his voice crackling with static from his translation collar. They cannot just vanish. What if they carry the anomaly with them? What if they destabilize the outer sectors? Elder Mira of the Sylth Enclave sat very still, her silver eyes half closed. She did not speak, but her thoughts moved like slow tides. She remembered the old records, the ones buried deep in the archives marked unverified. Stories of other young species who had vanished without warning centuries ago. Each time the same pattern. Discovery, silence, then departure. The Concord had always called it myth. Now she was not so sure. Back on Aurora's End, Captain Ben Carter stood on the bridge of the Odyssey. The ship was massive, longer than 3 city blocks built not for war but for survival. Its hull gleamed under the distant sun, patched in places with recycled metal from old satellites and decommissioned stations. It was not beautiful, but it was strong, and it was ready. Final shuttle docked, said a voice from the comm station. It was Mara Lynn, the ship's chief science officer. Her dark hair was pulled back, her face tired but steady. She had not slept in 36 hours, but her eyes were sharp. Ben nodded. Seal the bay. Run full diagnostics on the drive core. Aye, Captain. He walked to the main viewport. Earth filled the view, blue, white, fragile. He thought of his daughter's laugh, the smell of rain on dry soil, the sound of waves on the Oregon coast. All of it gone now. Not destroyed, just left behind. He had argued with the Council too, back when there was still time. He had shown them the data from the Antarctic dig site, the artifact, the signal, the warning. They had called it noise, human imagination, fear dressed as science, but Ben knew better. So did Mara. So did the thousands of scientists, engineers, and dreamers who had worked in secret for years to build this fleet. They had not run from danger. They had answered a call. On Xylos Prime, the debate raged. Some wanted to send warships after the human fleet. Others demanded a full investigation into why the Concord had failed to act sooner. A few, like Elder Mira, simply sat in silence, watching the empty space on the council floor where the human delegate's chair used to be. Lena Voss had been recalled from her post hours ago. Officially, she was under review. Unofficially, she was being punished for caring too much. But as she stood on Aurora's End, watching Earth's last lights blink out one by one, she felt no regret. Only sorrow, for the galaxy that had refused to listen and for the people who had chosen to leave rather than wait for understanding that would never come. Captain, Mara said softly, stepping beside him. The core is stable. Navigation is locked. We're ready. Ben took a deep breath. Signal the fleet. All ships prepare for jump. He turned away from Earth, not with anger, not with sadness, but with purpose. Somewhere beyond the edge of known space, past the Perseus arm and into the uncharted dark, the artifact's signal grew stronger. It was not a warning of doom. It was an invitation. And humanity, for all its flaws, had decided to accept it. On the bridge, lights dimmed to standby. The hum of the engines rose to a low thrum. Outside, the stars seemed to lean closer as if watching. Down on Earth, the last city, Reykjavik, flickered once, then went dark. Silence fell over the planet, and in orbit, the Odyssey turned its nose toward the void. The Galactic Concord watched from afar, confused, alarmed, and too late. They had spent centuries judging humanity as reckless children. Now, as the human fleet prepared to vanish into the unknown, the Council realized something terrible. The children had grown up, and they had left the adults behind. Part 2. 5 years earlier, the world had still believed in second chances. Earth scientists had drilled deep into the ice of Antarctica, chasing a strange energy signature that pulsed like a slow heartbeat beneath the frozen continent. What they found was not rock or ice, but something smooth, black, and older than language. It hummed when touched. It showed images in the minds of those who stood near it. Vast shapes moving between stars, galaxies folding like paper, time itself unraveling at the edges. Dr. Mara Lynn had been there. She was young then, only 32, with sharp eyes and a mind that refused to accept easy answers. She had spent weeks studying the artifact, recording every shift in its signal. When she and her team finally decoded part of its message, they sent the data to the Galactic Concord, hoping for guidance, for partnership, for anything. Instead, they got silence. Then came the quarantine order. No ships in or out of the Sol system. No data sharing. No contact. The Council claimed the artifact was a temporal contaminant, a danger to the stability of space-time. They said humanity lacked the maturity to handle such things. Earth's leaders protested, but the Concord's enforcers were already at the edge of the system, their warships dark and unmoving. Ben Carter had been a transport captain back then, flying cargo between Mars and the Belt. He remembered the day the news broke. He had been drinking coffee in a station diner when the alert flashed across every screen. Sol system quarantined by Galactic Concord Directive 7. People around him stood up, shouting, crying, demanding answers. Ben just sat there, his coffee going cold. He knew what it meant. They were being locked in their own home. For months, nothing changed. The artifact kept humming. The signal grew stronger. Mara and her team worked in secret, hidden in underground labs, piecing together more of the message. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a trap. It was a warning and an offer. Something was coming. Not an invasion, not a storm, but a shift in the fabric of reality itself. A cosmic event that would ripple through the galaxy in waves, dissolving matter, rewriting physics, erasing entire star systems if they were not prepared. And the artifact held the key to surviving it. When Earth tried to send a probe beyond the quarantine line to test their findings, the Concord destroyed it without warning. Then they destroyed the research outpost on Europa that had helped build it. That was the moment everything changed. Humanity stopped asking for help. They started planning to leave. Project Exodus began in silence. Factories on the moon switched from building satellites to life support modules. Asteroid miners redirected their hauls to construct hull plating. Engineers on Mars designed engines that could fold space without leaving a trace. No one spoke of it openly, but everyone knew. Families packed small boxes of photos, seeds, soil from their gardens. Children learned star charts instead of history. The world grew quiet, focused, determined. Lena Voss had tried to warn the Council. As Earth's delegate, she stood before the Grand Chamber and pleaded with them to listen. She showed them the data, the projections, the proof that the artifact's signal matched ancient cosmic background patterns no human could have faked. Elder Mira watched her with quiet interest. Ambassador Kale laughed. "Your species sees patterns and shadows," he said. "You mistake fear for prophecy." Lena left the chamber that day with her badge still pinned to her chest, but her voice already gone. Back on Earth, the work continued. Ben Carter was pulled from cargo runs and given command of the first ARC ship, Odyssey. He didn't ask why.
He just said yes.
Mara joined him as chief science officer. Together, They tested jump drives, recycled air systems, closed-loop farms. They trained crews not for battle, but for patience, for hope, for the long dark between stars. The Concorde never suspected the scale of it. They thought Earth was sulking. They thought humans would eventually beg to rejoin the galactic community. They did not understand that humanity had stopped seeing the Concorde as allies. They saw them as bystanders, well-meaning, perhaps, but blind. Then came the final trigger. A deep space telescope hidden behind Neptune caught it first, a ripple in the void near the galactic core. It moved slowly, silently, but it was real, the same pattern the artifact had shown. The event had already begun. Earth had maybe 2 years before the wave reached them. That night, the world's leaders met in a bunker beneath Geneva. No speeches, no debates, just a single vote, unanimous. Activate Exodus. Over the next 18 months, the fleet grew, not just one ship, but dozens, carrying not just people, but libraries, DNA banks, seeds, soil, music, art, every story humanity had ever told. They would not just survive. They would carry Earth with them. The Concorde noticed too late. When their scouts reported unusual activity in the Sol system, massive energy signatures, shipyards glowing day and night, they sent a formal inquiry. Earth did not reply. Then one morning, the quarantine line went dark. The enforcers found it abandoned. The Sol system was emptying. By the time the Council realized what was happening, the last shuttles were already lifting off. Now, months after the Exodus, the truth still hadn't reached most of the galaxy. Official reports called it a mass delusion, a cultural collapse. But in the Concord archives, a young analyst named Eli Dawson was digging. He wasn't important, just a junior data clerk with too much curiosity and not enough supervision. He had grown up reading old Earth novels, listening to human music, fascinated by their messy, passionate way of living. He found the suppressed files by accident. Buried under layers of encryption marked historical anomaly, do not access, were records of other disappearances. The Cathari 12,000 years ago, the Orlan swarm 8,000 years before that, each time the same signs. An artifact found, a signal detected, a sudden silence, then departure. The Concorde had erased the pattern, calling it coincidence, but Eli saw the thread. He tried to report it. His supervisor told him to delete the files and forget what he'd seen. That night, Eli copied everything onto a tiny crystal drive. He didn't know who to trust, so he sent it, encrypted, routed through a dozen dead channels, to a fringe news outlet on Helios Minor. Then he packed a small bag and vanished into the lower levels of Xylos Prime. Back on the Odyssey, drifting now in the quiet between stars, Mara reviewed the artifact's latest transmission. It was changing. The signal was no longer just data. It was almost like a voice. Not in words, but in feeling, warmth, welcome, urgency. Ben stood beside her on the bridge. "Do you think they'll ever understand?" he asked. Mara looked at the star map, at the empty space behind them where Earth used to be. "Maybe not in time," she said. "But someday someone will listen." And somewhere in the galaxy, a young analyst ran through dark corridors, clutching a secret that could change everything, if anyone was willing to hear it. Part 3's months passed. The stars outside the Odyssey's viewports no longer looked familiar. Constellations had shifted, stretched, rearranged by the ship's long jumps through folded space. Inside, life settled into a quiet rhythm. Children went to school in converted cargo bays. Gardens grew under soft artificial light. People walked the corridors not with fear, but with purpose. They were not lost. They were following a path only they could see, but the galaxy behind them was in chaos. The Galactic Concorde had sent scout ships after the human fleet. Dozens of them. Fast, sleek vessels with the best sensors the Council could offer. None returned with clear answers. Some came back empty, their crews gone, logs wiped clean. Others never came back at all. The few that did reported strange things, patches of space where instruments failed, where time seemed to stutter, where voices whispered in old Earth languages over dead comms channels. Ambassador Kale demanded action. "They are spreading instability," he declared in the Grand Chamber. "We must stop them before they tear a hole in reality itself." Elder Mira did not argue. She simply asked, "How do you stop a species that no longer exists in the space you understand?" Her question hung in the air, unanswered. On Xylos Prime, public opinion turned. Species that once mocked humans as reckless now whispered in fear. Markets dipped. Travel between systems slowed. Parents told their children not to look too long at the stars. The Conquered tried to calm the panic, issuing statements that the human exodus was a closed matter. But the truth was leaking. Eli Dawson's data crystal had done its work. The fringe newsnet on Helios Minor published everything. The old disappearances, the artifact patterns, the council's cover-up. The story spread like wildfire through underground channels. Lena Voss watched it all from her small apartment on the edge of the capital city. She was under house arrest, her access codes revoked, her name erased from official records. But she still had eyes and ears. A former aide, loyal to the old ideals of the Terran delegation, sent her updates in coded messages hidden inside routine supply orders. She knew about the missing scouts. She knew about Eli's leak, and she knew the council was more afraid than they let on. One evening, a small drone hovered outside her window. It carried no markings, only a sealed data crystal. She took it inside, heart pounding. The file opened with a single line, from the Odyssey. For Lena. It was a message from Dr. Mara Lynn. Lena read it slowly, her hands trembling. Mara explained that the artifact was not a warning of destruction. It was a key, a doorway. The cosmic event the humans had detected was not an end. It was a transformation. Reality itself was preparing to shift, and species that understood the signal could choose to step through, to become something new, something beyond physical form. Humanity had not fled death. They had accepted an invitation to evolve, and they had left too late for the Concord to follow. Lena sat in silence for a long time after reading it. Then she copied the file, encrypted it, and sent it through 3 separate dead drops. She did not know who would find it. But someone had to know the truth. Out in deep space, Captain Ben Carter stood on the bridge as the Odyssey entered a region the artifact called the Threshold. Stars here burned with a strange blue tint. Space itself seemed thinner, like fabric worn thin by time. Sensors showed impossible readings. Gravity bending in loops, light moving backward, echoes of events that had not yet happened. Mara joined him, her face pale but calm. "The corridor is opening," she said. "We're close," Ben nodded. He had read the same reports from the scouts the Conquered had lost. He knew what waited ahead. Not death, not even travel. Something deeper, something final. "Are we ready?" he asked. Mara looked at the crew on the bridge. Young engineers, doctors, teachers, farmers. All of them volunteers. All of them willing to leave everything behind for a chance at something greater. "We've been ready since the first light went out on Earth," she said. Back on Xylos Prime, the Council held another emergency session. This time, even Ambassador Kale seemed unsure. The latest scout ship had returned with its hull covered in strange frost that burned to the touch. Its captain was alive but mute, staring at his hands as if they no longer belonged to him. When asked what he saw, he only whispered one word: "Gone." Elder Mira stood and walked to the center of the chamber. "We judged them too soon," she said, her voice soft but clear. "We called them children because they felt too deeply, acted too quickly, dreamed too loudly. But perhaps it was their feeling, their speed, their dreams that allowed them to hear the call when we could not." No one argued. The truth was settling over them like dust. Meanwhile, on a dusty outpost on Helios Minor, Eli Dawson worked under a false name, repairing comms gear for freight haulers. He kept his head down, but his mind raced. He had seen the replies to his leak. Thousands of messages from curious citizens, scholars, even a few low-ranking Conquered officers. Some called him a traitor, others called him a prophet. He didn't care. He just wanted someone to understand. One night, as he tuned an old receiver, he caught a faint signal. It wasn't on any known frequency. It sounded like wind through trees, like distant singing, like a voice saying goodbye. He recorded it, played it back. Buried in the static were words in English. "Thank you for listening." He didn't know if it was real or his mind playing tricks. But he saved the file anyway. Far beyond known space, the Odyssey slowed. Ahead, the stars parted like curtains. A corridor of light, soft and endless, stretched into the unknown. The artifact's hum filled every system on the ship, not as noise, but as song. Ben gave the order. "All hands prepare for transition." The fleet moved forward as one, and behind them the galaxy watched, confused, afraid, and too late to follow. Part 4. A year had passed since the last human ship vanished from known space. The Galactic Concord officially closed the file on humanity. The records listed them as extinct due to self-inflicted exodus. The words sounded clean, final, like closing a book. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, the story would not stay buried. On Xylos Prime, the Grand Chamber held its usual sessions, but something had changed. The air felt heavier. Counselors spoke less and listened more. Ambassador Kale still pushed for stronger borders, for tighter control over young species, but fewer voices joined his. Even the Vereth enforcers moved with less certainty. They had chased ghosts and found only silence. Elder Mira spent her days in the archives now, not as a counselor but as a seeker. She wore simple robes and asked no favors. She read the old records again. The Cathari, the Orlan Swarm, the dozen other vanishings the Conquered had erased. Each time the same signs, an artifact, a signal, a choice. She began to wonder if extinction was not the end, but a kind of birth. And if so, what had humanity become? Lena Voss remained under house arrest, but her small apartment had become a quiet hub. Messages came to her through traders, messengers, even cleaning bots with hidden storage. Some were from former allies. Others were from strangers who had read Mara's message and wanted to understand. Lena never replied directly. She simply passed the truth along, like a seed dropped in dry soil, hoping it might one day grow. Out on the fringe world of Helios Minor, Eli Dawson lived in a metal shack near the spaceport. He fixed comms units for credits and kept his head down, but at night he worked on something else. Using scraps of old tech and stolen data chips, he built a decoder, a device meant to listen for the faint echoes of the human signal. He believed they were not gone, just changed, and if they had left a trail, he would find it. One rainy evening, his decoder lit up, not with noise but with a pattern, clean, repeating, familiar. It matched the Antarctic artifact's base frequency. His hand shook as he traced the source. It was not coming from deep space. It was coming from the edge of the Perseus Arm, near where the last scout ship had lost contact. The signal carried no words, only a series of pulses that, when mapped, formed a shape. A double helix, the symbol of life. Eli recorded it, encrypted it, and sent it to 3 trusted contacts. Then he packed a small bag. He knew he could not stay. The Conquered would come for him if they found out. But he also knew he could not stop now. Back in the void beyond known space, Captain Ben Carter sat alone in the Odyssey's observation lounge. The ship floated in a place where stars did not shine in the usual way. Light here bent around thoughts, not mass. Time flowed like a river with many branches. The crew no longer needed sleep the way they once did. Their bodies were changing slowly, gently, guided by the artifact's song. Mara Lynn stood in the heart of the ship, where the artifact rested in a cradle of magnetic fields. It no longer hummed, it glowed. Soft pulses of silver light moved across its surface like breath. She placed her hand near it, not touching, just feeling. Images filled her mind. Oceans of light, cities built from memory, beings made of thought and starlight. Humanity was not dying. They were becoming. Ben joined her. Are we still us? He asked. Mara smiled. More than ever. We're just learning what that really means. They had not left Earth behind. They had carried it inside them, the love, the pain, the hope, the questions. And now, in this new place, those things were growing into something new. On Xylos Prime, the changes were slower but real. Young students began asking questions in schools. What if the humans were right? What if the artifact was a gift? Teachers who once dismissed such ideas now paused before answering. In the markets, traders sold small trinkets shaped like Earth, blue glass orbs with white swirls. No one knew why they became popular. They just felt right. Even Ambassador Kale grew quiet. He spent long hours in his private chamber, reviewing the final logs of the lost scout ships. In one, the captain had written, "They are not gone. They are waiting." Kale deleted the line from the official report, but he kept a copy. Eli Dawson reached a small research station on the edge of conquered space. It was run by a retired Sylth scientist who had once studied cosmic anomalies. She took one look at Eli's decoder and nodded. "I've heard this before," she said. "In the old songs of my people, we called it the first voice. Together they tuned deeper. The signal grew stronger. It was not just one pulse. It was many, layered, harmonizing like a choir singing across time. And buried in the harmony was a message, not in words but in feeling. You can still choose. Eli cried that night. Not from fear, but from hope. Back on the Odyssey, Ben recorded his final log. His voice was calm, steady, full of peace. We're not running. We're becoming. And maybe someday you'll understand why we couldn't wait for you. He saved the file to a small probe, one of the last physical objects the ship would release. Inside it was not a weapon, not a warning, but a seed, a tiny capsule of Earth's genetic memory, coded with instructions for any who might one day follow the signal. The probe launched silently into the void, aimed not at any star but at the place where curiosity might one day bloom. And in the grand chamber on Xylos Prime, Elder Mira rose during a routine session. She did not speak of policy or borders. She simply said, "We were wrong about them, and if we do not learn from that, we will be wrong about everything." No one argued, because deep down they all knew. It was too late to fix what had been broken, but it was not too late to listen. Part 5. 2 years after humanity left, the Galactic Concord held its annual Unity Convocation. The Grand Chamber on Xylos Prime filled with delegates from over 100 species, robes of deep blue, armor of polished bronze, skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns, all gathered under the high dome where starlight filtered through ancient crystal. It was a ceremony of renewal, of shared purpose. But this year something was different. In the center of the chamber, one chair sat empty. It was not removed, not covered, not replaced. It remained exactly where it had been since the first human delegate arrived, a simple seat of dark wood and woven fiber, brought from Earth long ago. Now it was draped in a cloth made from cotton grown in old Kansas fields, and silk spun from Martian silkworms, a quiet gift left behind by Lena Voss before she vanished from public life. No one had dared touch it. The silence around that chair was louder than any speech. Elder Mira entered last, as was tradition. She walked slowly, her silver eyes scanning the room. She did not look at the empty chair, but everyone knew she felt its presence. Ambassador Kale sat stiffly in his place, his usual bluster gone. Even he had stopped calling for action against the vanished humans. There was nothing left to fight, only questions that would not be answered. The convocation began with the usual pledges: peace, cooperation, the protection of young species. But when it came time to honor lost members, the speaker paused. For the first time in conquered history, a species was declared departed, not dead. The words hung in the air like smoke. No one clapped. No one argued. They simply bowed their heads. Outside the chamber on the wide plaza of Xylos Prime, a low hum passed through the air. It was not loud, not even audible to most ears, but those who had known humans, traders who once dealt with earth goods, scientists who studied their art, soldiers who faced them in old border disputes, felt it in their bones. A vibration, soft and familiar, like the echo of a lullaby half remembered. No one spoke of it, but many looked up at the sky. Far beyond the city, on a quiet ridge overlooking the capital, Lena Voss watched the convocation through a small viewer. Her house arrest had ended quietly, without fanfare. The council had no use for her anymore and no reason to keep her locked away. She lived simply now, tending a small garden of earth plants grown from smuggled seeds. Tomatoes, basil, marigolds, they thrived in the alien soil, stubborn and bright. She had not tried to return to politics. She knew her time there was over. But she still listened, still watched, still hoped. On the fringe world of Helios Minor, Eli Dawson stood on the roof of his new workshop. He was no longer hiding. The Concord had stopped looking for him after the data leak faded from the headlines. Now he worked openly, teaching others how to listen to the deep signals. A small group gathered around him, young Sylth, curious Vireth, even a few old Terran sympathizers. They called themselves the Listeners. They did not claim to know the truth. They only claimed to be ready when it came. That morning, Eli's decoder had picked up something new. Not a pulse, not a song, but a single tone, steady, warm, repeating every 17 seconds. The same rhythm as a human heartbeat at rest. He did not broadcast it. He simply saved it and smiled. Out in the void, near the edge of known space, a small probe drifted. It had no engine, no power source, no guidance system. It moved only by the gentle push of solar winds and the slow pull of distant stars. Inside its shell, a seed slept, wrapped in layers of protective gel, coated with the DNA of Earth's forests, meadows, and oceans. On its surface, etched in microscopic lines, was a simple message in every known language. Welcome. Begin again. No one had found it yet, but it was waiting. Back in the grand chamber, the convocation ended. Delegates rose and filed out, speaking in low voices. None approached the empty chair. None touched the cloth. But as Elder Mira passed it, she placed a single white flower on the seat, a bloom from her homeworld, rare and fragile. A gesture not of mourning, but of respect. Later that night, alone in her quarters, she played the final log from Captain Ben Carter one more time. His voice was calm, clear, full of peace. We're not running. We're becoming. And maybe someday you'll understand why we couldn't wait for you. She turned off the recording and sat in the dark. Outside her window, the stars burned as they always had. But now she saw them differently, not as points of light, but as doors. And somewhere beyond them, humanity walked through. The galaxy had spent centuries believing it was the teacher. Now, for the first time, it felt like a student, late to class, unprepared, but still willing to learn. On Earth, the planet turned in silence. Cities stood empty, rivers ran clean, forest grew over roads, the air was pure, the oceans healed. No one lived there anymore, but life remained, and in the deep ice of Antarctica, the artifact still hummed, softly, patiently, waiting for the next listener. The Concord would never admit it had been wrong. Not openly, but in quiet moments, in hidden labs, in whispered conversations between old friends, the truth spread like roots through soil. Humanity had not failed. They had leapt. And the galaxy, for all its wisdom, had been too slow to follow. Now, all that remained was the empty chair, the drifting seed, and the hum in the bones of those who remembered, and the stars, watching, waiting, wondering who would be next to understand.